Folks, the unions at one point in time did serve a valuable purpose. And they helped to create an atmosphere of workplace safety and true consideration for workers' rights. But in my view, they have long since outserved their purpose and have gone to the point of insanity in some of their demands and their expectations. And today it's the Twinkie. I would argue that tomorrow, be prepared. It'll be your public sector union, your government, that goes the way of the Goonie bird, which may not be a bad thing, except for all those people who are dependent upon government. That's my take on the world, as I remain somewhat somber and saddened by the death of the Twinkie. You're listening to the Palmetto Conservative Show here on the CB Media Network, Conservative Broadcast Media Network. Glad you're with us. Stick with us. We'll be back on the other side here. Be right back.
You said in the Rose Garden, the day after the attack, it was an act of terror. It was not a spontaneous demonstration. Is that what you're saying?
Please proceed, Governor.
It is in response to a video, a film. This is in response to a video.
Internet video that we had nothing to do with.
That was spontaneous? Was it a planned attack? Was there a terrorist element to it?
This is a response to a hateful and offensive video.
The video and its influence on the protests that occurred in Cairo and Benghazi. In response to this video, it was the video that caused the unrest in Cairo, that precipitated some of the unrest in Benghazi, and it was sparked by the reaction to this video. The video was a precipitating cause to the unrest, specifically in Libya. Might take advantage of a situation that was brought about initially as a response to the video in question.
Natural protests that arose because of the outrage over the video.
You're totally correct that they spent 2 weeks telling us this was about a tape and that there was this riot outside the Benghazi consulate, which there wasn't.
Natural protests that arose because of the outrage over the video.
I was in chronic pain, and my family struggling to make ends meet, food and gas prices going up, even keeping my job was iffy. Then I learned about a new miracle drug made in Washington, D.C., Spenditol. Spenditol is Washington's answer to all the painful problems Americans face. How to borrow $800 billion for a stimulus that didn't create jobs or fix the economy? Spenditol.
Spenditol is not for everyone. Side effects may include a mountain of government debt piled on our kids, a sudden loss of freedoms, higher prices for everything, leaving our kids a lesser America than we had. Ask your doctor or congressman if your conscience is strong enough for Spenditol.
And it's so popular in Washington, we have to import trillions more of it from China. Spenditol makes you feel better now and pushes off the really bad stuff till later, for them to deal with.
Call the White House and Congress. Tell them, stop spending it all.
Look, you can't be serious, man. You cannot be serious!
That is one of my all-time favorite lines from John McEnroe, or of any other, for that matter. I grew up in a time when John McEnroe was at his zenith. You're listening to the Palmetto Conservative Show here on the Conservative Broadcast Media Network. I'm your host, Jim Lee. Moving right along, that second part of that ad block, very humorous. And the funny thing is about humor is that there has to be an element of truth in it in order for it to be funny. But the first part of that fits in quite nicely with this next segment. I continue to refer to the ongoing saga of what went on in Benghazi as Benghazi Gate. Some feel that we're making mountains out of molehills, but I would argue that Benghazi Gate is a very good and appropriate characterization of what went on, because it conjures up the notion of Watergate and cover-ups. For those that don't like that term, perhaps we'll just call this segment Moments of Bovine Fecal Matter. Maybe that's what we'll do. We'll call this Moments of Bovine Fecal Matter going forward. You know, we learned, since last Wednesday when I went into some degree of detail about Benghazi and where we were at that point in time, and the anticipation of former CIA Director, retired General David Petraeus, testifying before the closed-door intelligence committees in Congress, what that might lead us to. And as time goes on, I find myself growing more and more upset about the continued line of bovine fecal matter that we are being fed by this government. Those who have any experience in the oxymoronic field of military intelligence understand a little bit about the government, the Department of Defense, intelligence oversight, the National Security Council, the intelligence community itself. And for those like myself who have that background, listening to the continued spin, nay, cover-up, of what had to have transpired is particularly frustrating. First, we're told that Benghazi was the result of a spontaneous protest in response to an offensive YouTube video that disparaged the Prophet Muhammad. That Muslims were upset and responded. And they trotted out this explanation, knowing full well that no one in the intelligence community believed this or reported this. And then it changed, and we're trying to hang our hat on arguments that say that, well, we didn't necessarily call them Al-Qaeda because we didn't know. We called them extremists. Yet you couldn't find your way to use the word terrorist, which is the proper term in our current lexicon, since we refuse to call it what it is, and that's radical Islam. But then there was all this nonsense after Ambassador Susan Rice was trotted out, essentially as a White House spokesperson, with talking points we're led to believe, the source of which, the background of which she did not know. She was merely out there representing the best information she had available, the best intelligence information available. And we'll talk a little bit about that and what that says about Ambassador Rice's supposed intellect. But nevertheless, all the while she's out at the behest of the White House. Apparently no one else in the White House was qualified to serve as White House goon or spokesperson to simply go out and toe the White House line, deliver the story, continue the MAME. And they decided, hey, this would be a great opportunity. Since we know that Hillary Clinton is going to be stepping aside, retiring as Secretary of State, this will be an opportunity to perhaps give Ambassador Rice a little bit of camera time. But that has created another issue again, which I'll talk about a little later, around the whole notion of whether Ambassador Rice is qualified to be nominated for Secretary of State. But back to our line of bovine fecal matter. It was a video, then it was extremists, then it turns out, of course, it was terrorist attack. It was self-evident, according to the White House talking head, Jay Carney. But then we're told that, no, some talking points were changed, that the classified talking points were supposedly changed in order to sanitize them, so as to not reveal classified sources. Well, in making an assertion that the activities that took place at Benghazi were the results of terrorists, as opposed to a spontaneous protest in reaction to a disparaging YouTube video, has nothing to do with disclosing intelligence sources. This whole discussion isn't about where the conclusion came from, on what information it's based. This whole thing is about why a false narrative was foisted upon the American people, why 4 Americans are now dead at a at a diplomatic facility that, in retrospect, supposedly shouldn't have been there to begin with. Why did this administration, for not a period of hours, not a period of days, but a period of weeks, continue to trot out this false narrative? And we had testimony, both open and closed-door testimony, asserting that the Keystone Cops up there in Washington couldn't figure out who changed the talking points. Well, if there is one thing that our Leviathan bureaucracy has, it's protocol. And I can assure you that when it comes to the intelligence information and the way it is disseminated and handled, it follows a very precise protocol. So why it's so difficult to try and figure out where in the various handoffs that take place, classified intelligence that said this is terrorist activity, we believe it's Al-Qaeda. Why in the world we can't figure that out, to me, screams bloody incompetence of biblical proportions, that the president and his leadership should be called to task. And then as far as the spinning and the false narrative and everything else, that might raise to the level of high crimes and misdemeanors. Now, lest you think that I'm just, a right-wing conspiracy theorist, know that what we're talking about here is something that any low-level military intelligence officer or enlisted who spent any time working in the intelligence community could tell you. So it's not that I have some sort of special insight or intelligence, and it's not that I'm looking for tilting windmills. This is common sense. How anyone in the world can not be at wit's end, ready to pull their hair out, as this complicit media and this administration continues to try and feed this nonsense narrative and continue to try and cover up. Well, now we have, the story that nobody knows who changed what. Well, now, today, the Director of National Intelligence, retired General Clapper,